Divine law is incontrovertible. The same can be said of the law of gravity, to foil and lift and allow airplanes to fly. Each is an absolute truth. Doctors or pilots do not have the power to change those laws, but their understanding of them safeguards lives.
Welcome everybody to another episode on the Stick of Joseph YouTube channel. I'm Hayden, and today we're going to be reacting to a video from our prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, which today, when I'm actually recording this, is his 100th birthday, which is crazy to be 100 years old. That is so old, and I'm so glad that he's still around because as we will see, he has a lot of wisdom that he has learned, and he's participated in some world-changing events as a medical doctor and a heart surgeon, and he's going to be drawing from some of those experiences to demonstrate something that is really important and I see is missing in today's world. Secular society is creating a place where objective morality and objective truth is not existing, where they create a place where it can't exist. And I want to talk about that today because there are so many implications if you don't believe that there is an objective morality that I feel like rots our society, rots our souls individually, and President Nelson is going to give us the antidote. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by watching a clip from a speech that he gave. It's a BYU speech. It's called The Love and Laws of God by Russell M. Nelson, 2019, and he breaks down 5 different rules. We'll link it in the description so you can listen to the whole thing if you want to. It's only 24 minutes, but he goes through 5 different principles that he has learned, and this is going to be the second one, and we're going to talk about the lesson he learned from this experience in his life. So let's just get into it.
Well, the second experience by which I came to see the power of divine law came during my career as a medical doctor and scientific researcher. After graduating from medical school, I pursued advanced education in surgery. At that time, there was no such thing as heart surgery. Then, I teamed up with other researchers in the daunting task of making an artificial heart and lung machine. We knew that such an apparatus could possibly maintain the body's circulation while repairs might be made on the heart. But during that early era, there was much we did not know. Then one day, 2 truths articulated in the Doctrine and Covenants spoke to my inquiring mind. These truths were, first, that all blessings are predicated upon obedience to law. And second, that to every kingdom there is a law given. Well, I reasoned that if every kingdom had a law, there must be laws that govern the beating heart. I was determined to discover those laws and obey them. By doing so, blessings would come, and lives could be saved.
Okay, first off, I just want to point out how insane it is. He starts off by talking about at that day there wasn't such thing as heart surgery, which is crazy today because it's just become normal in the medical world to be able to perform heart surgeries, right? And so he's living in a time before that was even done. He, with his team, developed the first heart and lung machine, which is a crazy achievement. And he said that one of the things that inspired him to do that is a scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it's actually Doctrine and Covenants 30 or 130, and it is verses 20 and 21. Let's read it. It says, "There is a law irrevocably decreed in heaven before the foundations of this world, upon which all blessings are predicated. And when we obtain blessing from God, it is by obedience to that law upon which it is predicated." So right there is a big stab to the heart of the idea that truth is subjective, but that there is an underlying law that has existed since the beginning of the world. So let's take a second to talk about this law that was predicated before the foundations of the earth. Now, this idea is actually, it's been talked about since the very beginning, But specifically when it became popular in Western philosophy was like 535 BC by Heraclitus of Ephesus. He was a Greek philosopher, and he kind of coined this term that you guys may be familiar with called logos. And the way he described logos is essentially the underlying principles which govern the universe. Now you actually find use of this in the Bible in one of the most famous verses ever. And it's in John 1:1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." In Greek, it says, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God." Now, I'm going to go on my own personal midrash on this real quick, and I'm going to share my thoughts on this because the Protestant and just the rest of the Christian world, they view it as in the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. And I think that is an interpretation. I think the scriptures, they're multivalent. So they're able to, with the language of both Greek and Hebrew, they're able to embed multiple simultaneously correct interpretations of certain passages, and I think this is one of them. So the way I understand this is, in the beginning was the underlying principles which govern the universe, and that's exactly what we read about in D&C 130, 20, and 21, that before the foundations of the world, there was a law irrevocably decreed. That is the Logos. And then it says, and the Logos, or the underlying principles that govern the universe, were with God, and the underlying principles that govern the universe were God. And so I actually believe that this is kind of like a temple type thing. So you see the three spaces, and we've talked about that with Dave and Mike Day. But I think it shows the pathway to becoming like our Heavenly Father. So there are underlying principles. You are introduced to those underlying principles. The being that we call God, our Father in heaven, was introduced, came to understand those underlying principles that govern the universe, and then those underlying principles that govern the universe became our Father in heaven. Like, he adopted them. It's kind of like how patience is a virtue that exists in and of itself, but people can become patient, right? And so you almost can become these abstract virtues. They become a part of you. And so I actually think that it may be a layout of how we can become like our Father in heaven, is that we learn all the underlying principles that govern the universe, the commandments, and that's what the commandments are. And we understand those, we wrestle with those, right? And then eventually they become a part of us because we adopt those, and then we can become like our Father in heaven. So I just want to point out that this idea brought forth in D&C 130 and what President Nelson is talking about, it exists in the New Testament as well. Once again, I understand this is my personal interpretation of it, but I think it's a pretty good one. I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. So let's keep watching. Oh, the other thing that he pointed out real quick before we get into there, what do you guys think? Do you guys like using actual scriptures? I just have a hard time if I just use digital scriptures. There's just something about I gotta have it in my hand. It just takes a little bit longer to get to the verses. But this one's really cool. So D&C 88:38. I'll actually start in 36 and 37. All kingdoms have a law given, and there are many kingdoms, for there is no space in which there is no kingdom, and there is no kingdom in which there is no space, either a greater or lesser kingdom. And unto every kingdom is given a law, and unto every law are certain bounds also and conditions. I really like that's really cool. And so he's talking about how there are certain principles that underlie the universe, and there are multiple kingdoms within the universe. So a couple of them that I thought of is like the kingdom of physics. There are certain laws that we are discovering. We're not making up these laws. They exist. And so for those who think that morality is subjective, they probably don't think that physics is subjective, right? They probably don't think that biology, actually, I don't know, that's getting kind of crazy too, that biology is subjective. But there are multiple kingdoms, so physics, biology, mathematics. These all are governed by certain laws, and we're doing our best in the scientific mathematic community to discover what those laws are. So if it exists in that kingdom, it makes sense that it would exist in the kingdom of morality and ethics, that there is an objective morality, that there is an objective ethic, just as there are objective rules that govern physics and mathematics. And that's what he's getting into here, and I think President Nelson does it beautifully. But yeah, let's keep watching and see what else he has to share with us.
In medical school, I had been taught that if one touched the beating heart, it would stop. However, one of the first things we discovered in the lab was that we could touch the heart of an animal without losing its heartbeat. This finding opened the door later to uncovering another law that made more complex open heart operations possible.
I just want to pause before he gets into that. This is something that's really important to understand, because a lot of people who are critical towards the church or towards religion generally, they point out that things have changed, that the church has evolved in some of its understandings of things like race and the priesthood. That's something that's very controversial. The endowment and the presentation of it changing over time. And a lot of people point out and they're like, hey, obviously you can't, like, this isn't a strong ship that you can stand on, because look, it's not the same as it was at the beginning. But I think this shows something perfectly, where it's like when you are trying to learn and gain revelation, it is a learning process. Like you go so far, you test it out, and it doesn't work. So at first they were like, how are you supposed to perform surgeries on the heart? Because if you touch the heart, it's just going to stop. And then they start touching hearts, and they're like, oh, it's not stopping. And so that leads them to what this next thing is that he's going to share. But I think it's important that us as people, that we come to recognize that the learning process, line upon line, precept upon precept, it is divine, and there's no way around it. There's like, I won't say there's no way around it. What I will say is that there are some instances where I think you can receive a bunch of knowledge at once, a big revelatory experience. Those do happen. But I think that they are few and far between, and that we can seek after those, and I think it's good that we seek after those, but I think it's important that we get comfortable with the idea that revelation is a back and forth experience. It's a learning experience. So I love how he demonstrated that there. So let's see the truth that he learned after getting rid of a lower idea that happened to not be an underlying law of the heart.
We learned that if we added potassium chloride to blood flowing into the coronary arteries, thereby altering the normal sodium and potassium ratio, the heart would stop beating instantly. Then, when we nourished the heart with blood that had a normal sodium-potassium ratio, the heart would spring back to its normal beating pattern. Literally, we could turn the heart off long enough to repair it and then turn it back on again. Decades later, when I explained this to a group of medical students, one prominent professor asked, "But what if it doesn't work?" My answer,
I'd be scared to turn off someone's heart and then be like, am I going to be able to turn it back on again? But President Nelson has a better answer to that.
It always works.
Yeah.
Because it's based on divine law. Divine law is incontrovertible. The same can be said of the law of gravity, the laws of foil and lift that allow airplanes to fly. Each is an absolute truth. Doctors or pilots do not have the power to change those laws, but their understanding of them safeguards lives.
Wow, that is powerful. It's amazing. And the reason it's so important to understand this, that there are actual objective, solid laws that govern the universe, that govern morality, that every single blessing is predicated upon, is because it allows us to become agents, to actually be able to decide what our future looks like. Now, We're not ever going to be able to decide all of our circumstances, our environment, and every single variable that comes into our life. But if we consistently keep getting results that we are not happy with, what that means is that we do not understand fully or are not properly executing on certain incontrovertible laws of the universe, whether it's within our relationships, whether it is with our school or hard work or building a business or anything spiritual. We need to understand that there is some sort of law that we don't understand or we're not implementing properly. And that is hopeful. You know, I always have a hard time with people when they want to push the blame of something really big onto something else that is outside of their control. The reason I have a hard time with that is because you better hope it's within your control, because you can't control anyone else. The world is too big. The whole universe is too big for you to control. So you better hope that whatever problem you have is your fault, because guess what? If you are humble and you put off the natural man, those problems can go away by you changing, or another word for that would be repenting. And so I'm asking everybody who's watching, if there is a result that you're getting in your life over and over and over again, and you're just tired of it, ask God what law, just ask him one law that you need to understand, one thing that you need to understand and start implementing in your life to change it. And I promise you that if you do that, and even though you'll do it imperfectly, that you will start to see a change and you will start to get the results that you want because of this principle that President Nelson is sharing with us. Don't get caught up and start believing in what the world is saying, that your truth is the truth and everyone can have their own truth. That is not true. I'm saying truth a lot and true a lot, but they're good words. We're talking about an important thing. It is, if you start to believe that, you will end up in a whirlwind, in a tornado with all these consequences that you feel like you don't deserve, because in your truth, you should be able to do this, this, and this and still get that, that, and that. But that is not how it works. You need to understand, if you want this thing, you need to understand what you need to do to get that. And so be comfortable with, be grateful for the fact that there is an objective truth, that there are underlying principles that govern the logos, or govern the universe, what we called earlier the logos. And I'm so grateful for Christ because he came down and he embodied those. A lot of times when you just have abstract ideas such as patience, love, kindness, and you can understand them abstractly, firmness, steadfastness, but when it's embodied in a person and you get to see those actions, it helps you to be able to model it better. And so I'm so grateful for Christ for coming and becoming the Word made flesh. He was the Logos made flesh. He lived the underlying principles that govern the universe. So let's follow him. Let's do our best to be like him. And if we do that, then we will find the fullness of happiness in this life and in the life to come. So love you guys. Let's follow the prophet. Let's follow Jesus. And until next time, stay curious and hungry.